Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. Welcome to this webinar on the latest announcement of the new set of Construct Zero Business Champions. That's an initiative backed by the Construction Leadership Council. I'm Chloe McCulloch. I'm Editorial Director of Building Design and Housing Today. And joining me today, I've got a brilliant panel speaking. So we've got David Partridge, Chairman of Argent Related, and he'll be giving us sort of some industry reflections. And we've got Stuart Young, Head of Stakeholder Engagement and Management at the Bays Construction Unit. And then we have our 4 CLC business champions. So we've got Lara Young from Costain, Mark Perkins from Peak, Joseph Tucker from Knights Brown, and Karen Hills from Atkins. So welcome all. Thank you so much for giving up your time to talk to us today. So what will happen, just to give you a bit of a run through of what we're doing, you'll hear from all of them giving their own perspectives, and then we will go to a Q&A session. So please do post your questions, and if you specifically want me to direct them at a particular panelists, please do say. So post your questions throughout, and I'll be checking in on those and making a note of them. And yeah, so that will be the last part of the webinar. But before that, I'm going to hand over to David, who can kind of give us a bit of an overview and some industry reflections. So over to you, David, and the rest of us are going to turn our webcams and mics off, and the floor is yours.
Thanks very much indeed. And yeah, it's to be here today to launch, and honoured to launch the second round of Business Champions. People who were drawn from across the sector, who are now, I think, going to be listed on the screen if we can share a screenshot. You'll be shortly hearing from 4 of them, who I've introduced to you already, and they're going to tell you why they decided to put themselves forward as business champions, the importance of this initiative to them as a business, and indeed talk a little bit about which of the 9 Construct Zero priorities that they and their business are particularly interested in. It's also an opportunity for us to learn a little bit more about the Construct Zero Industry Change Programme and those priorities, which range across everything from modern methods of construction, designing out carbon, through to developing new low carbon materials, retrofit, diesel on site, and so on. But before we get into the detail, I'd like to reflect a little bit about the importance of these business champions and indeed of the programme itself. We've just completed an extensive consultation exercise from which we're going to be adapting and launching the Construct Zero framework next year. All of this is, I'm sure you're aware of, the COP26 coming up in November. And so everything that we're doing now is working with inexorable momentum towards that event. Never, I don't think, and I've been in this business for quite a long time, have I seen such a massive momentum building up across the world, across the political spectrum, across industry, and across society behind a collective push to deliver net zero emissions targets in order to improve the world and to see off the climate change challenges that we face us today. I've also been invited here as a member of the advisory panel for this particular initiative and as president of the British Property Federation. And my business, for those of you who don't know, Argent is as a developer, and Argent Related as a developer, an owner, and an operator. So I'm really keen to ensure that this initiative is actually picked up by the entire real estate sector. It's really important that everybody works across every aspect, from construction through to ownership, to buildings in use, to buildings in operation and buildings in occupation. And my particular reason for being here is to ensure that the good work that is put in place by people like today's champions will actually be heard across the entire sector, and will give other people who are perhaps making decisions about where they might locate, where they might invest, how they're going to go, and how they give them chances to pick up on these sorts of activities in order to be able to join in the push towards net zero. It's really important that the entire sector gets behind this. Otherwise, there's simply no way that we're going to achieve the target of 2035 as a minimum that's been set for us in order to achieve such great progress. So I'm really pleased to be here to support this program. I'm very, very interested and to hear from the business champions themselves. And I really commend them for stepping up and taking this challenge on. And I urge many others of you who are listening today, please to do the same. Thank you. Back to you, Chloe.
Thank you so much, David. That was great. So that gives us a nice overview. We're going to pass across now to Stuart at BEIS, and he's going to kind of just give us a bit of an overview of what work's going on in terms of net zero at the government department, and also just describe the importance of the CLC's Construct Zero programme. So, Stuart, I'm going to hand over to you. There you go.
Great, thank you, Chloe, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're well and can see me. So, as David has set out, construction has got a very key role to play in the PM's net zero targets. Fundamentally, without the construction industry playing its role, the targets will not be met. So I'm just reading across two screens, it's why my eyes keep moving around. So Construct Zero is a huge program. It is attracting interest from right across the entire breadth of the sector. So we're getting real strong interest from SMEs in the local high street through to large scale global corporate companies that may be headquartered in London, but have got a global presence. So really kind of showcasing the role of construction globally in meeting these challenges. This is fantastic. We're going to say, and if you are listening today and are not a business champion or a business partner and would like to get involved, do drop me an email. We would love to hear from you. We're also working with successful business champions to kind of raise awareness of their work through other avenues as well. So that includes ministerial visits, comms articles, and we will shortly be pushing out a third commission for the new business champions later today. But for today's announcement, I really wanted to thank the companies who've come forward and are now part of the Construct Zero programme. Really looking forward to working with you and kind of promoting your message accordingly. What I would just conclude in saying is that the programme is obviously a key part of the government's offer in terms of the climate change space. We are working heavily with Cabinet Office COP Unit colleagues, the UN Climate Champions team and BEIS to position the programme centrally, and we'll be looking to kind of use and promote the Business Champions programme at COP as we enter the final stages of the kind of assessment. But that's probably enough for me. So back to you, Chloe.
Thanks so much, Stuart. Just to pick up really briefly, when you said you're working with other government departments ahead of COP26 to promote business at COP26, can you give us some sort of flavour of how that might work? I mean, we're not quite sure how much businesses will be able to kind of attend COP26. Yep. Do you have any more information around that, how businesses can be involved?
No, so at the moment, in terms, there's a couple of points there. So in terms of attendance, there hasn't been a decision made yet, is my understanding, on whether the event will be kind of an in-person or virtual summit. There's no kind of, I think there'll be probably some kind of decision across the summer, but we don't know yet know that. In terms of kind of other departments engagement, just to give you an example, that's I personally am engaging quite heavily with Department for Transport colleagues at the moment, looking particularly at how we can engage with, for example, Highways England and Network Rail as well. We've already spoken to about how we kind of engage them and get their buy-in to the kind of the Construct Zero programme, and we've already had conversations with HS2. So we're looking to kind of have those conversations with key kind of departments who are quite important to actually not just the messaging, but actually the kind of the buy-in and the delivery of the programme. And what I would say is, in terms of businesses, just repeating my earlier message, Chloe, if the businesses, I mean, we've got over 100 people on the call today, so if there are businesses who want to get involved in the Construct Zero program, we are onboarding partners at any time and champions on a monthly basis. If you are interested, please do drop me a line. We would love to hear from you.
Great, thanks very much, Stuart. That's fantastic. Well, what we're going to do now, I'll just encourage all of our listeners to post questions as well, so that we can have those lined up for the Q&A session. So any questions that have come up, please do post them. I'm keeping an eye on the inbox, so do put them in there. And we're going to go over now to some of the business champions. So I thought we could start with Peak. So if we could start with Peak, and over to you, Mark. I will turn off my mic, and Cameron, you're just going to give us your perspective and what it means to be a business champion.
Yeah, sure. That's great. Thank you very much, Chloe. And yeah, thank you everyone for allowing us the opportunity to speak to you today. So I'm Mark, and I'm the construction territory lead at Peak. And if you're not familiar with us, then we're a scale-up technology company and already work with some of the world's biggest brands such as Nike, PepsiCo and KFC, basically helping them use artificial intelligence, or decision intelligence as we call it, to drive improved business performance and deliver overall transformation. However, I'm fortunate enough to look after one of our fastest growing sectors, which we call construction supply chain. And it basically means that I assist forward thinking merchants and manufacturers and service providers, also increasingly house builders and contractors, to adopt decision intelligence. Now, I won't give a full explanation of how it works right now, as we've only got a short space of time, but fundamentally it involves creating bespoke AI algorithms which help businesses make predictions and decisions in areas such as production scheduling, managing inventory, material sourcing and distribution, as well as many others. And then we can then make these algorithms work in sync so that effectively our customers can make the best possible decision at any given moment in time, using all of the relevant internal and external data that exists across their whole value chain. Now, I'm probably biased, but I think we do it quite well, and we've built some brilliant technology to achieve it, and already have a strong customer base with companies like Marshall, Polypipe and Speedy, amongst others. But it's very much a growing list, and we're probably now speaking to about 100 or so similar companies. However, while we've been great at creating these uplifts and efficiency gain for our customers, it's usually been done so with a view to improving financial performance. And what is often being missed, or is at least seen as a less tangible benefit, is that AI can have a huge impact on sustainability. By being able to understand demand like never before, we can make sure that we are producing the right amounts, that we can reduce waste, that we can resource the right levels of materials and ensure they are distributed around our networks as efficiently as possible. And at Peak, we're a very young company and we take social responsibility very seriously. It's embedded in our culture, and we definitely want to leave the world in a better place than when we found it. And so it means we're doing a lot to improve our own sustainability in-house, but we're also working more closely with our customers to help them realise how they can use decision intelligence to achieve their own carbon zero targets. And personally, I'm doing a lot of work to help customers establish and monitor the key metrics around reducing their carbon emissions. And I'm also driving initiatives around how improved data collaboration between contractors and their suppliers will in turn lead to greater efficiencies. So overall at Peak, I think we have a real opportunity to help companies drive sustainable transformation, and we're delighted to now be recognised as a business champion in the Construct Zero programme. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview and background to Peak, but to give you a bit more granular detail about where we can make a difference, then I think we can assist in 3 of the 9 priority areas that have been highlighted by the CLC. The main one, as I mentioned, is being able to better forecast demand so that we know when products are required and are able to get them where they need to be at the right time. And we're already working with a handful of manufacturers and certainly aggregate suppliers to predict customer demand and project timelines and balance this with product and fleet availability in order to route vehicles as effectively as possible and reduce mileage when transporting goods to sites. Then in a separate area, and under the priority areas, we have some really exciting projects where we are using machine learning to predict how different materials will impact overall product quality and sustainability. And it allows our customers to test different formulations, which will in turn allow them to create lower carbon products. And additionally, the final area is that we're also working with leading real estate providers to monitor things like asset utilization and energy consumption in their buildings, and then allowing them to create tailored plans for their tenants to drive energy efficiencies. So I think overall there's quite a lot that we can do, because all modern businesses and the products they make through to the customers that they serve, they capture a huge amount of data points, and a human brain just isn't capable to process all of these in real time and act upon them quickly enough. But with AI we can, and it can drive huge efficiency gains. So that's a bit of a flavour of what we do and why we're sort of really delighted to be included in the latest list of business champions. And yeah, look forward to doing more work with everyone else in the future.
Brilliant, thanks, Mark. I just wanted to follow up just briefly on. It sounded really interesting what you were saying about, you know, AI's ability to help with prediction. I just wondered whether you could just, obviously the industry's at the moment having a real supply issue in terms of supply chains are really struggling under sort of huge new demand and finding lots of supply problems. Have you seen AI suddenly being used much more as a tool? You know, I know obviously we're talking in the sense of net zero here, but you know, just in terms of the industry at a bit of a crunch point right now.
Yes, increasingly so. We're not going to solve the sort of material shortage issue. We're not, you know, claiming that AI can do that. But I think being able to forecast more quickly, having more agility in understanding the sort of demand and what's available, and then potentially sort of balancing that with the customers that you might serve with the limited amount of materials or constraints that you have, prioritizing those maybe for profitability or for sort of long-term growth and lifetime value. These are the types of things that we can do and are helping customers with at the moment.
That's great. Well, listen, I'm going to encourage our listeners. We've already had some really good questions posted, but if you've got any particular questions for Mark on AI and the potential for net zero, please do post them. And we're going to go over to our next business champion now, who is from Costain. Wonderful. Thanks, Laura. I'm going to hand over to you now.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Chloe. My name is Lara Young. Thank you ever so much for the invitation to present. And so, yes, what I'm going to give you is hopefully an overview of how the benefits and what we've aligned with the Construct Zero's 9 priorities in the framework. So firstly, who are Costain and what's my role within Costain? So I'm Lara Young, Costain's Group Carbon Manager. So Costain as an organisation is a smart infrastructure solutions provider, and we actually operate across the entire value chain of and the entire life cycle of a construction project. So we can be at a very early stage at concept design and very much in advisory or consultancy services, all the way through to detailed design or construction, but also asset optimization, so optimizing already existing infrastructure. And so actually at the end of 2019 and beginning of 2020, we launched our Climate Change Action Plan, which is a plan that sets out how we over the next 15 years will become net zero as an organisation. And what this plan does is it sets out very clearly not just how Costain is going to address its direct emissions, but it's very much focusing on the whole life cycle of what we need to address. So a lot of our scope 3, so helping to address not only our organisational emissions, but actually that of the entire value chain and supply chain. So working very closely in collaboration with our supply chain partners, clients, and the wider industry. And so in that nutshell, and the reason the alignment with the Construct Zero's 9 priorities framework is that actually the way that we've gone about this and is very much looking to understand, actually casting the entire picture to figure out actually where is the greatest and biggest opportunities for carbon reduction in the here and now, being able to break down how do we actually get to net zero. So our Climate Change Action Plan doesn't look to tackle climate change in one go. What it has done is broken down very clearly what we need to do first, and then how do we get to the next steps to genuinely achieve net zero by 2035 at the very latest. And a huge amount of that is focusing on the biggest hotspot areas. So very much using data, as Mark quite rightly pointed out, around using that information to inform where our biggest priorities are, but then really establishing a plan that helps address those to understand actually, okay, what do we need to do step by step? And then the hardest part is following through and holding it accountable to that. And so the reason that we're delighted to be one of the Construction Leadership Council's carbon champions is that this very much aligned to the framework's priorities around actually setting out a plan, but also holding that accountability and really driving that forward to lead industry change. So our climate change action plan addresses pretty much all of the priorities across the framework, and that being from the acceleration of availability of low emission and net zero plant and machinery on construction sites, all the way through to how do we shape our contracts to ensure genuine carbon reduction incentives in our contracts, incorporating circular economy into how we actually function as an organisation and how we actually do business for tomorrow. And one of the key things I think was really quite compelling in the framework, and that we're very much looking to spearhead in that space, is that it's whilst continuing to innovate for tomorrow and ensuring that actually where there are currently gaps at the moment, we continue to accelerate and find the right solutions for that. It's also very focused on, and our plan is very much looking at taking tangible action today, so that there isn't one silver bullet answer to addressing net zero and climate change and the wider industry challenges around that. However, there are some genuine, very tangible steps that we are taking and we have taken over the last year and a half to really make some significant strides in that. And that's not just Costain as an industry, but as an organisation, but working with the wider industry to really industrialise innovation and making that the new norm. So yeah, the business champions framework and 9 priorities has been a huge enabler to help shape and formalise and structure that, with not just our ambitions to help change the industry and lead that change, but also drive this far wider. So thanks ever so much, Chloe.
Thanks. So stay with me a minute there, Laura. I thought there was just so much that's really interesting that we should maybe unpack a little bit. Obviously, Costain, you said, you know, you've really seen in the last year and a half really some tangible actions. Could you point to something sort of specific to make it a bit more kind of real, I suppose, less abstract?
100%. So a huge part of, and this is the founding step or one of the foundations around addressing climate change, is we're very focused on not trying to make everyone a carbon expert, because we don't need to be. What we do need is to translate carbon into what does that mean for everyone else day to day. So the idea is making carbon and that whole agenda, demystifying the topic to make it accessible. So we've been rolling out, and we continue to roll out, a climate change action plan training program, which is very much doing that and bringing to life actually what does carbon mean or net zero mean if you are a QS, if you are a planner, if you are an engineer, and that's continuing. And we've done over half the business at this point in time, and continuing to roll that out and building on that, in addition to rolling out group-wide standards around the mandate of using telematics, which is very much using data that's provided by plant and machinery, for example, to understand exactly actually, whilst we can't maybe swap out at the moment every excavator or dumper for an electric alternative because it doesn't exist yet, we're working with manufacturers to help accelerate that market availability. But in the interim, what we have done is we can mandate the use of this information to make sure that the vehicles that we are using are being used as efficiently as possible. So one of the very tangible ones is addressing the idling challenge that our industry has and really bringing that down. And we've seen some phenomenal like jumps in behavior change and the culture change around that, and some significant carbon reductions, but also logistical fuel reduction. So you're no longer having as much impact on the local community as well. So that's been a huge one as an example.
No, that's great. That's great to have an example. Look, I'm sure I'm going to encourage our audience to post questions, because I just think that there must be loads of experience and examples that you can share with us, but we will save that for the Q&A at the end. Thank you very much, Laura. So now we're going to move on to our next champion, and that is from Atkins. Are you able to turn on your webcam? Wonderful. Thank you, Karen. I'm going to hand over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chloe. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Karen Hills, and I am the head of the Carbon and Sustainability Programme for Atkins. Delighted to be on the call this afternoon. Atkins, alongside Faithful and Gould, who've also been announced as a business champion today, a part of the wider Atkins, part of the wider SNC-Lavalin group. We're design and engineering consultants. So why did Atkins and Faithful and Gould apply to be a business champion? Atkins' vision, as set out in our 5-year plan, is around us being committed to embedding sustainability in everything that we do, progressing attitudes within the industry and aspiring to make all the projects and schemes on which we work net zero by 2030. So we want to proactively work with our clients and to make sure that net zero is at the heart of delivery for everything. And then finally, we felt it was a logical progression from the Construct Zero commitment, which was announced at the Business 7 Summit back in May, that a number of large consultancies signed up to, committing to offer ambitious design options and advice to our clients that are compatible with net zero outcomes. So what is Atkins doing in the net zero space? So SNC-Lavalin has committed to be net zero by 2030, and Atkins at the UK and Europe level has signed up to be carbon neutral for 2021. In May of this year, SNC-Lavalin published a route map which sets out how we are going to drive down carbon across our corporate activities, and the route map sets out how we're going to look at our scope 1, 2 and 3 greenhouse gas emissions with a view to reducing them by approximately 60% by 2030, and that's from a baseline year of 2019. In addition to that, our engineering net zero programme looks at how we are delivering low carbon sustainable solutions across all of activities, and that extends from our strategy through to how we deliver to our clients, our corporate activities, but also how we develop, train and support our staff to really embed those key principles within our culture. As part of that, we've launched in January our engineering net zero website, which obviously I'm biased, but I would highly recommend you go and have a look at it. Not only does it sort of showcase how we're delivering low carbon solutions for clients across a range of sectors, but it's also a great format for our thought leadership programme. And it's got some really great articles on there around all sorts of diverse carbon related topics, from the sort of challenge of decarbonising aviation to looking at options for greenhouse gas removal and the energy transition that we need to go through in order to achieve net zero. So yeah, go check it out, Engineering Net Zero. In terms of which of the priorities we're particularly interested in around Construct Zero, obviously we have an interest in and an ambition to influence all of the 9 priorities, but we've selected 4 that are sort of most relevant to our business, where we think we can make the most tangible difference. So priority 3 around decarbonising transportation. We're working on quite a few of the large-scale rail schemes going on in the UK at the moment, Crossrail, HS2 and TransPennine. So obviously key to decarbonising our transportation systems, but also at a more local level, we're also working with local authorities, producing things like low carbon transportation studies for them. So we operate across that wide scale there. Priority 4, working with government to look at retrofitting to produce energy efficiency. We're on quite a few frameworks looking at energy efficiency in buildings, including working with the Government Property Agency, who manage a significant proportion of the government estate, again helping them implement the government's net zero building agenda. Priority 6, enhancing the energy performance of new and existing buildings. And our teams are constantly looking to improve energy efficiency in buildings, and in fact our building design team are committed to looking at both embodied and operational carbon in all the projects that they work on. Finally, priority 7, implementing carbon measurement to support construction projects. We are applying a whole life carbon management approach on projects. So working at making sure that we're looking at carbon consistently, but also that we're making it visible both to us and our clients, because if you can't see it, you can't reduce it. And hand in hand with that is working closely with our design and delivery teams, making sure that people are carbon literate, can understand where the carbon is in their projects, and can hold sort of informed conversations around that. So that was just a very brief summary, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Karen. That was a great overview. I just had one thing I wanted to pick up. I know you mentioned the 4 priorities that you're really focusing on, although all 9 are important. And maybe at some stage I might ask one of the members of the call just to run through all 9 of the priorities for our audience, just so they've got that as an overview, or maybe point to the website where they can find them. But you mentioned transport, and obviously there are the big rail schemes that people want to make a difference. But I wondered if your teams are working on any points to do with sort of active travel and things around that, because people talk about, you know, trying to encourage cycling, trying to encourage walking, those sort of micro journeys. And if Atkins has worked on any of those sorts of schemes as well.
I think they feature as part of some of the transport strategy work that we do, but also we do a lot of master planning for cities, and obviously increasingly that's a really important part of you know, those projects, making sure that you know, city spaces are increasingly designed for people, more for people and less for cars. So quite a bit of work around that.
Exactly. Okay. Well, look, again, to anyone on the call wanting to ask questions specifically around transport schemes, or any of the aspects around sort of designing for net zero, please do post those questions to the panel, and we'll use that in the Q&A, which is coming just up. Just after our last champion, who comes from Knight Brown, that's Joseph Tucker. If I could ask you to join the call, or turn on your webcam. Here we go. Brilliant. Thanks, Joseph. I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thank you, Chloe. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joseph Tucker. I'm a section engineer from Knight Brown Construction. Knight Brown is an independent, multidisciplinary construction company based in Ringwood, Hampshire, with offices all across South England and Wales. I'm going to read an extract to you now, which was delivered by our business leader, with some additional points from myself, which I think covers the key points quite well. Our transition to net zero is important because it's the right thing to do for future generations, for nature and biodiversity, and it's the right thing to do to secure our survival of our business. As a generation, we have the final opportunity to take action to limit global warming to what is considered an acceptable level. In moving towards net zero, we become part of the solution instead of the problem. Climate change is both a risk to our business and an opportunity. Expectations of us as an employer are changing. Each successive generation that joins us holds us to a higher standard, and if we don't respond to that, we won't be able to recruit and keep the talented people that make Knight Brown what it is. Likewise, our customers' expectations will change. To an extent, this may be driven by personal moral compass, but public sector reform will play a large part of it. We've already seen this in the publication of the Construction Playbook, which sets out the government expectations for the assessment, procurement and delivery of the public work projects. This includes contracting authorities achieving net zero by 2050. This will filter through the entire system, and we won't be able to win contracts with these public bodies in the future if we don't adapt now. A failure to adopt would also result in difficulty securing bank facilities and insurance cover in the future. As any business not pursuing the route to net zero will be considered a bad risk to service providers. We need to realise that the entire global economy will undergo a systematic change that ultimately means organisations not addressing climate change emergency will lose their licence and operate and ultimately fail. Carbon is seen as a proxy for the resource efficiency. Given the efficiency and productivity challenges construction faces, It's in our interest to correlate the relationship between the two and find ways to drive them both down. We're very much at the start of a long-term transition. Over recent months, we've been developing a strategy for climate action, which we've now launched under the banner Goal 13. We've added a new accountability for our leadership team, which is written into each role to demonstrate our commitment, and that it's not just one person's job, it's everyone's. It states our commitment to bring all our employees with us in the transition to net zero. We've also made a declaration that acknowledges the urgent threat and the scale of the challenge, and recognises the risks posed and opportunities presented. We've set a clear objective, but have not set a timescale to achieve net zero. What we're proposing is a phased approach, although the phases will overlap as we make progress. The first phase is to account and disclose emissions for all activities and operations up and down our value chain. Phase 2 is defining a pathway to reduce emissions. We will work with the Science Based Target Initiative to identify an approach that makes progressive reductions year on year, and which will give us a visible and credible timeline to reach net zero. For the emissions that are more difficult and will take long to mitigate, we will quantify the internal cost per tonne of residual carbon, and then the plan is to turn the cost into a fund to compensate for the residual emissions. We will do this by investing in projects and actions that are climate and nature positive, which are also, wherever possible, achieve a broader benefit in biodiversity and society. The essential element is that the project invested are high quality and achieve the desired mitigation outcomes. We've established a maturity model to progress our primary focus areas, starting from the point of establishing a sustainable thinking and personal responsibility in all our people. Through progressing the changes and adapting what we do, leading up to the embedding carbon reduction in the process that define how we do business. There are some of the 9 priorities that are more relevant to our business. Those relating to construction activity and transport reflect our principles best. It makes sense to get our own house in order first. That's to say, measuring and mitigating scope 1 and 2 emissions that we control. Then we'll prioritise those as scope 3 emissions that we think will have the biggest impact. So to start with, that's the vehicles our people are using, not least the vans, our directly employed workforce travel to site in, and the plant we're using in our operations. Very much fall into the category of issues under our own control and that we can manage directly. We own a lot of plant, so we're carefully looking at developments in electric options and alternative fuels. Modern methods of construction will achieve safer, better, faster, greener project delivery, and we need to be a part of the revolution to remain relevant, survive and succeed. Clearly, our big impact areas are going to be material procurement, notably cement, steel and aggregates, so doing what we can to support the development of low carbon alternatives and finding ways to design our carbon have to be right up there for us. Ultimately, to report credibly, we need everything to be measured so we can report from that. And that sort of covers my key points. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joseph. That's really great. Well, look, I'm going to, at this point, just invite everybody back. So if everybody can turn their webcams on, and we can go to some of the questions. So it's been great to see people involved in asking questions. But I think one thing I was just going to observe is that the common thread that seems to come from the Business Champions is to come up with a plan. That seems to be the main piece of work that all of the companies have sort of gone away and really thought about. And I suppose my question to each of the champions, just to start off with, would just be, you know, to give some of the people on the call an idea of how much work does that take? Like how much time have your companies taken on these plans? And I know the proof is going to be in the pudding in actually executing the plans, but for people on the call where they might be at organisations that may be less far down the track, how much work have you had to put into these? Could someone just kick off? I could maybe start with Lara. I'll just pick on you, Lara. Sorry.
That's absolutely fine. Yeah, so from establishing a plan, 100% it is one of the foundations of where do you go next. But it's also key. I think it is a fine balance of also understanding actually what you currently have in terms of painting the picture of what an organisation's emissions are as well. So a lot of the information for the industry is already there. It's probably, well, it is siloed, and it's a case of joining up dots rather than trying to sometimes pull all of this information together yourself. So it's really understanding actually what do you currently have within your gift at the moment in terms of being able to paint a picture of where the organization is at, understanding actually, because a number of your value chain or supply chain or clients will also have that information, so collating what's already available to you as well. And I think a big part for me is, and this is my personal opinion, is the data and the plans. No plan is perfect. It's a case of understanding, actually having a sufficiently mature picture to understand actually where are the big hitters and the first things to do, whilst you continue to increase and enhance the quality of the data, because you could, you can spend a huge amount of time focusing on the data, but missing the opportunity to actually inform change. So it's that fine balance between using what you have available, but it is something that's requires, I would say, the effort in terms of pulling it together, yes, but it's also something that requires a frequent and an ongoing review. So I think it's more part of the key is integrating it in what you already do as an organization is probably the easiest way to ensure that you sustain that momentum, because as you say, a plan's great, but if you don't follow through on it, it's basically just a commitment. So yeah, that'd be my...
Thank you, Laura. That's really, really helpful and practical. Just to pick up, I thought might go straight to Mark on that, just in terms of Laura made the point about, you don't want to get swamped in the data. And obviously, when you're focusing on AI, how would you advise people on the call to remain focused and not get sort of distracted by just pulling lots of different bits of data?
Yeah, so we're a service provider. We're not sort of creating these frameworks ourselves, but we're helping businesses to execute upon them. And often you can see this inertia that people think they need to have a perfect data set, and that's not the case. You need to use what data is available, if possible, then sort of add into that, be able to sort of bring in additional sort of data sets, but it doesn't need to be perfect. It's about doing something better than you're currently able to, and gradually take those sort of steps to move forward and drive improvements. And it might be we start with something that's small, but gradually you'll recognize what's missing, what else you need to bring in. So it's a mindset of continuous improvement, but don't be put off because you don't think you have the sort of right data or it's in a mess. There's companies that are able to sort of help you with that.
Wonderful, thank you. Karen, you were nodding vigorously there.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One piece at a time. So yeah, I agree with everything that Mara and Lara and Mark have said. It's around, focusing effort on the areas that will make the biggest difference, and then looking to sort of gather more data, more detail, and do more year on year and build cumulatively on what you've done.
Yeah, Joseph, do you want to come in on that question?
Yeah, I have to say I agree with everything that everyone's put forward there, and particularly the taking one step at a time with the elephant. It was quite a large task to us at Knights Brown. We're still in quite early stages. Yes, seeing the information and trying to work out how we're going to record it, and then realizing we've already got the information. And not to look too hard, it's already there. So yeah, I think it's been put very well there.
That's great. And we've had a question come in about, so everyone referred to the 9 points in the CLC plan. I won't make anyone read those out, but for the audience members who don't know where that is, I think you will find it on the Construction Leadership Council's website. And I think it is broken down into sort of, transport, construction, and another section. So it does have a sort of logic to it. But I don't suppose anyone on the call that a supplementary question to that was, out of those 9, do any of the panel members see where the biggest gains could be made, or maybe perhaps the quickest gains? And it might depend on your business type where you can see those. So David, you're nodding at that. Can I pick on you?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I think one of the other things that I was going to add was that, I'm probably going to get it wrong, but we mustn't let perfection be the enemy of good as well. And a lot of people will begin to start looking at some of the framework responses and just say, oh, well, you haven't quite said enough about X, and the measurement that you're doing for Y isn't quite, blah, 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 blah. And they're right. There's so much that we need to do to improve in every single area of the 9 that we've set out. but we shouldn't stop and wait for the absolute ultimate measurement. We should all be looking at what we can do. And I mentioned a couple of them at the very beginning. I mean, I think it moves from everything from just getting rid of diesel on site, you know, within transport. I think someone mentioned that they were looking, I think it was Joseph was talking about you know your own fleet of vehicles, you know, just right from that through to, you know, how do you retrofit hundreds of thousands of homes that have been around for the last 100 odd years with to make them net zero. I mean, that's massive, and there are going to be many different ways of looking at that, from big changes to little changes. And what we're trying to do here with, you know, without trying to construct an elephant of our own, what we're trying to do is say, we'll go at every single bit of it, and if each of us has a nibble at that elephant, we will get our way through it. And I think that's really important to stress that there's you know, we are at the beginning of a journey, and we are all working very closely to learn from each other, find best practice, and really focus on the practical and stuff that we can do today. At the same time as trying to solve the problems for tomorrow and next year and the year after that as well.
Okay, thank you, David. That's really helpful. Just on one of these points, someone's posted, you know, about the sort of the question of emissions on site and trying to reduce those in existing fleets, and often saying that, you know, what companies have been doing maybe sort of temporary measures, and really what is needed is some sort of government tax relief to really drive the right incentives. So I suppose there is always a question, isn't there, between how much individual companies can do to do the right thing and how much the system has the right incentives. I don't know what, I'll sort of broaden it out, I suppose, to the panel to make it a bit easier to answer than just a specific tax incentive on plant. But do you think we're heading in the right way in terms of government incentives, or does it feel at the moment that businesses are forging ahead and assuming government is going to kind of come with them? I know CLC is a part government-backed body, but it's obviously it's a partnership, isn't it, between private sector and government incentives. So I don't know if any of the panel wants to jump in on that question. It's a slightly wider policy question, I suppose.
Not wanting to steal too much airtime, just to say that one of the whole objects of this exercise is to be able to go back to government and tell them where they can have most, you know, where they should be legislating versus encouraging. You know, where do you need a stick and where do you need a carrot? And you know, where is it a tax incentive versus a planning requirement that you do X or Y? And so at the moment, government will be the first to say that they're trying to learn from us, and they're trying to listen to what we can do. And if some of us, if some parts of the industry are prepared to do stuff voluntarily, well, then you don't need a government incentive for it. You don't need a tax incentive. You don't need a planning penalty for not doing it. But there are other areas where we say, look, guys, we can do an awful lot more if only you would insist on blah. And that's exactly what they want to hear. And that's the whole point of what we're doing today and over the next few months leading up to COP26 is to look at these and work out what are the enablers, what are the enablers and what are the blockers, and how can we together work out a way around these things in order to remove those blocks, or as I say, to provide carrots for all of us to want to do more of that if that's what's necessary.
That's really interesting. Sorry.
No, I was just really going to pick up on David's point and just emphasise that I think that's what the consultation has really shown us, is that so we've had over 2,500 comments back on the consultation. That's really started to show us kind of what the industry is needing, what it's looking for, where things are already currently happening in the industry, so we can kind of take a broad across the piece look, just building what David said about kind of what are the enablers, where's kind of intervention in the market needed, where is it best use, kind of going forwards. We know obviously all the political tensions on COP, that is one event in this kind of argument, this debate. But I think the sector stuff has kind of given us some indications of what they're looking for. This is one part of that.
Thank you, Stuart. I don't know if your webcam's working, but we can't see, but we can hear you, which is the most important thing. But that's Good. Thank you for coming in on
be,
that.
I've got my webcam. So it should be
Oh.
working.
Well, we can't. Well, I can't see you for now, but I can hear you. So that's the most important thing. And just
Okay.
a follow up to that, I will just say that we have had a few. I won't read out all of the different questions on that, but we have had different questions around incentives and around some people on the call, feel quite strongly that there should be legislation to make sure that things aren't just left to the private sector to pick up, and there are definitely some people on the call are of a strong opinion that things should be legislated for. So I'll just voice that there so that has gone out there. Right, I'm just checking through other questions. I think one thing I wanted to pick up on was how the business champions feel about being so public about making these commitments, and obviously that's quite brave. Has it felt a bit uncomfortable, and how challenging, I suppose, do you feel it's going to be? I mean, it's Lara's point about following through and being accountable. So I suppose it's just a reaction from each of the business champions on that, on that decision to be so public about it.
Personally, I think it's, no one's got the exact, there is no one silver bullet, so there is no single answer to what is right for net zero. So I think, and a big part of addressing the industry's challenges or the greatest emission sources is looking at, I suppose, looking in the mirror to understand, actually, we know where we're all very good. We also know where there's potential areas that actually we do need to get better, and a lot quicker at getting better at it. So I think the first step of being bold and recognizing that, but it's also, I suppose, a key part is reassuring that it's not, it's understanding actually there is no one sole entity that's responsible for all of this, and there's a big part of actually we know where we can certainly help clients and the supply chain and where we need to do better, but also what we're doing really well, and actually we need to do more of that. So it's not just pointing out actually where every organization's naff at, but actually there's a huge amount that we do amazingly well in the industry. What we need to do is make that the new norm. So that's the key part. So I think it is a balance between both, but yeah, from my perspective, I think it's quite a refreshing conversation to have in that sense. So yeah, and the pressure of, given no one knows the answer exactly, and there is no one sole answer, you can't prescribe one sole way of doing it. So I suppose that can take the edge off a certain amount of people.
And am I right that as part of agreeing to be CLC business champions, have you committed to publishing your progress? Is there how does it work? I'm not quite sure. Is there a sort of overall commitment, or do you then provide updates, or is it all done sort of within the CLC? How does that work?
Lara, do you want me to take that?
Yeah, sorry.
So I'm having some IT issues here, so apologies, my camera's not working. But so yeah, so the short answer is just, Chloe. Each kind of business champion has agreed to commit to kind of sharing their updates in terms of net zero, and the under Construct Zero kind of aim is that we're going to be kind of putting together sort of a progress update on a quarterly basis for how the business champions and also kind of industry more generally is doing. So that's one of the things we're sort of working through at the moment, is kind of what that might look like.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Does anyone else want to come in on that? That sort of, I suppose I'm being a little bit provocative and sort of saying, is there a sort of fear of failure? Is there a sense that as businesses you have to just overcome that and think, well, we're going to publish anyway, and that's a good, I suppose, a good discipline for us and a good way to structure our teams and our work and our targets? Karen, you just nodding there, so just going to pick up on you.
No, I was just, I mean, for Atkins, it's a case of, our clients are asking for it. They want to see what our commitments and aspirations are. So it's an imperative for us, really. And then I think once they're there, they almost in themselves help drive change, because you have made that commitment. Everyone is now invested in that target or goal or objective. So I think it helps encourage working towards that, and collaboration, both within organisations but also across organisations. And it's really interesting to hear what other businesses are doing and the challenges that they're facing. So I think there is you know, an opportunity for us all to learn from each other.
Wonderful. Well, look, I've got one more question that I'm going to put from the audience, and then I'll just ask you each for sort of a roundup before we sign off. So David has written in to say, would the panel agree that whole life carbon assessments should be a requirement for all projects going forward to really drive understanding of where we are now, whilst allowing future targets and carbon taxation to be developed, which should drive transformation? So I guess that's the question is basically, should all projects have a whole life carbon approach? Everyone's kind of—
I would say yes. I think you need to be careful in that you need to develop an approach that's scalable. You know, if you've got a 10k project versus a 50 million pound project, your approach has to be proportionate and scalable, and the tools that you use, you know, relative to that. And also it's about, you know, upskilling our designers, our project managers, you know, to recognize what that looks like and how to deliver it on projects.
Wonderful.
I think that's, I'm sorry.
No, come in, Mark, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so the sort of difficulty in doing that, and I don't know if anybody else saw the sort of FT sort of top 300 companies that were sort of having the biggest impact in reducing their carbon emissions. The real difficulty is, well, you can sort of understand the sort of the direct sort of implications, but when you try and look at sort of indirect influences across your supply chain, that's where it becomes really difficult. And trying to measure that, I think there needs to be more work around it in order to get to a more sort of accurate picture.
Okay, well, look, I'm just going to let everybody just say a last couple of words. Just, I suppose, one thing that you think is the most challenging thing you face, and then maybe a piece of advice for anyone on the call. So I might start with, sorry, Karen, you're smiling. Can I start with you? Is that fair? Oh, that's exactly what you did.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm not sure I've got any advice, but I think in terms of the biggest challenge, I think that we need to sort of embrace and start thinking about now. For me, it's around materials, so concrete and steel, you know. Yeah. Sorry, the dog's going crazy. There's someone at the door. I'm going on mute now and avoiding the advice.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you. So concrete and steel, let's stick with that. Lara, can I go to you next?
Yeah, sure, no worries. So mine would be, and definitely I do agree with Karen, concrete and steel is a massive emission source, but I think the one for me and the biggest challenge is around actually not overcomplicating it. Actually, the industry pretty much, I suppose the beauty of our industry is that actually we all have pretty much the same emission hotspots. So whilst we have different relationships with how we can impact them and influence them, it is very much the challenge is understanding actually where is the biggest bang for our buck in terms of really driving change and focusing on those first to really get that going, and then we can move into some of the other areas. So yeah, the prioritization is a really hard one to ensure, because actually everyone would very much, the ambitions there, it's just actually breaking it down so that it's bite-sized. And in terms of advice, I would say it's, you know, it can be overwhelming, but just don't overcomplicate it. No one's got all the answers, so it's a case of understanding actually what can you do now, where do you need to go, and just following through and holding yourself accountable to it. So yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Joseph, any final words?
Yeah, I think a major challenge is knowing where to start, and knowing what you have control of. So obviously we're starting by trying to get our house in order, and that's what my advice really would be, is just take small steps, take it one bit at a time, get yourself in order, and then look at the large picture and just progress. We're all in this together at the end of the day. That's the point of groups like this. We're all here to share best practices and ideas, and we can all benefit from advice off each other and giving advice to each other. So yeah. Thank
you, Joseph. Mark?
For me, it's measurement and the establishment of metrics, so you can understand where you are now, where you want to get to, and work backwards to bridge that gap. And it's amazing, like the businesses that I speak to, if you ask people at operational level, what are the relative targets, what are the return on capital employed target, they all know. If you actually say, okay, what are you doing about reducing carbon emissions? They'll generally say that it's an objective to the business, it's part of our key strategic plan. But generally, when you start to say, okay, what does good look like? How are you trying to change this? What are you targeting with them? They don't know. it's something they want to do, but it's still a bit fluffy at the moment. So that needs to be taken more seriously.
Yep, thank you. David?
Mark stole my thunder, actually, because I was going to say measurement as well. I think it's absolutely crucial. I think across the board, both in terms of every area of the supply chain, through from construction right up, as I said earlier, to investors, to occupiers. They want to have the same measurement as well. They want to know what buildings that we're designing and building and delivering for them to occupy for the next 25 years. What sort of impact they're having on climate change. So that for me is the holy grail, and I'm with Mark entirely on that. And I think the only way to get it is to do what others have said, which is to work really closely together. I really commend all four of you and other champions who've been announced today, and others who've stepped up, and anyone who's listening, step up, get involved, share knowledge, share best practice. And from that, we as an industry will work out how to crack this problem, and we will do it. It'll take a bit of time. Government will get behind us. They're hugely supportive of what we're doing. They appreciate how much impact we can have together, and then they'll know what they need to do in order to respond to what we're doing, and where they need to push and where they need to pull, and where they're happy to sort of step back and let us get on with it, because we're showing the responsibility for doing it ourselves, which I think is also key. So well done all of you, and thanks very much for allowing us to speak today.
Thank you. And Stuart, I'm assuming you will echo those words.
Yeah, very much so. Just really to thank everyone for the time. Thank you particularly to the 4 business champions today, and looking forward to working with you all.
Wonderful. And obviously, if there are people on the call today that are interested in getting involved, then do get in touch with Stuart. He has said before that he wants to hear from you. So I think it's been really inspiring to hear about all of the work that's been happening from the 4 companies today. So thank you very much. Thank you for all of your questions. We didn't have time to read them all out, but we will pass them all on to the CLC. So I know they're very keen to get your feedback. So that will all get back to them. And we as an organisation want to follow this, so I'm sure we'll be doing more events like this with the CLC in future. It's really good to hear from the industry on this. So thank you very much for listening, and until the next time, thanks very much.
Okay.